Paper is part of all our lives. Whether through the written word or through visual images, we use paper to communicate. We use it in our work, our education, the fine arts, or simply to enable us to record our own thoughts and emotions. But do you know how paper is actually made?
The paper-making process really begins with these wood chips, which contain the natural cellulose fibre, the main ingredient of the pulp mix from which most paper is made.
Wood chips generally come from managed forests or plantations like this one, where wood is grown as a crop, just like wheat on a farm.
Whether the wood is sourced from forests or plantations, caring for the environment is always an important priority. This primary raw material is regarded as a valuable resource, which needs to be carefully managed. Here, when one tree is harvested, others are replanted.
Alternatively, chips are simply forestry thinnings, or waste from sawmills producing timber.
But coming back to the paper-making process, once the trees are felled, they are transported to the pulp mill.
When the wood arrives here, it needs to be debarked, as the bark cannot be used to make paper. However, it is used as a source of energy at the pulp mill to fuel the boilers.
Stripped and cleaned, the logs are processed into chips about 5 centimeters long and 2 to 3 centimeters thick. This mountain of chips behind me represents about 6 days' worth of raw material for the pulp mill. When required, the chips are fed into a huge vat called a digester, where they are cooked to dissolve the natural glue, lignin. The wood fibers then separate, resulting in a brown pulp. At this stage, the pulp is still raw. The dissolved lignin and other impurities have to be removed. This is achieved by a series of cleaning operations, during which the pulp is washed in clean water and bleached. Once the desired level of whiteness has been achieved, we are left with this pure white blanket of cellulose fibers. In recent years, the pulp industry has made considerable progress in changing over to bleaching agents which are more environmentally friendly than elemental chlorine, which was used predominantly before. It is this thick, white soup of cellulose fibers suspended in water which is now ready to be made into paper.
Depending on the type of paper being made, other ingredients are added to change its properties.
For example, natural fibers such as cotton linters or synthetic fibers may be added, or other additives such as dyes, fillers, natural or synthetic resins, and colorants.
The paper industry is also making increasing use of fibers which have been recycled. Some papers manufactured today are 100% recycled, but in most cases, papers for printing and writing contain a mixture of virgin fiber and recycled fibers to assure optimum product quality.
Once the pulp is converted back to its wet state, it's pumped through a series of refiners where the fibers are ground between rotating steel plates like these ones here. The main purpose of this process is to change the physical characteristics of the fibers to enable them to bind together more easily. This has a very important effect on the final quality of the paper. I am standing at what is known as the wet end of the machine.
The pulp arrives here having undergone a complex process of filtration and cleaning. It is spread evenly by the head box onto what is called the wire.
Here is a small piece of the wire. Traditionally it was made of wire, but today it's typically a nylon mesh like this, in the form of a continuous belt.
At this stage, the pulp is in suspension. What is going onto the wire is 99.2% water and less than 1% pulp mix.
So, all through the process of actually making the paper, we're trying to reduce the amount of water in the paper.
In just 30 seconds, when the finished paper is reeled up at the other end of the machine, it will have a moisture content of around 6%.
It's not the case on this machine, but it is here that any paper requiring a watermark would receive it.
A watermark is a mark actually within the paper. created when a cylinder, known as a dandy roll, presses very lightly into the damp paper as it passes underneath. Other types of watermarks, such as those for banknotes, demand much more detail and are done in a different way on a different kind of paper machine. By the time the sheet has reached the end of the forming table, it has lost a huge quantity of water. In the press section, the sheet is being squeezed between cylinders under very high pressure. This also compacts the fibers, and one can see the effect of this in these photographs taken through a microscope. After the press section, the sheet can now be dried properly by passing it over all these steam-heated drying cylinders.
All that remains now here in this drying section is for the paper to be given a surface treatment.
This usually takes the form of a light coating of starch or other binding agent, and its purpose is to improve the surface of the paper to enhance its printability. This is known as the size press, because the paper is being sized or sealed. Today, the whole paper-making process is highly automated. Every part of the paper machine is controlled by computer, and every production stage is monitored by sophisticated measuring instruments. From this control room, the operators here can monitor and adjust at any given time the grammage of the paper, its thickness, its level of humidity and porosity, even its color, as well as the speed of the winding up at the far end. The systems here are so sophisticated that they can identify one part of the process and compare readouts with previous runs of the same product to ensure a consistently high standard.
When each reel of paper is complete, a new one is started without stopping the machine. For ordinary uncoated papers, the paper-making process stops here. Many of our papers receive single or multiple coatings. What we mean by a coating is a thin film applied to its surface which gives the sheet particular properties. This could be to make coated paper for use in magazines or brochures, or to make thermal paper for use in thermal fax machines, or to make carbonless paper.
Here the paper is receiving an additional coating on a separate coating machine. A gloss or satin finish is achieved by calendering, running the sheet through a series of paired rollers under pressure. This paper is then typically used for printing luxury, top-quality advertising brochures. Other papers made by Arjo Wiggins Appleton undergo different processes. For example, some of our coloured creative papers are embossed to give them a surface effect, an important consideration where creativity is concerned, while some of our hospital and medical papers are craped to make them softer and more absorbent. Even though paper is one of the oldest elements of our civilization, it continues to play a vital role in our lives today. Whether for office use, for books, brochures, company annual reports, for the fine arts, or for industrial applications.